as we feel the connection here, we will go to the next presentation, and I'm very excited and happy to present to you Dr. Aleksander Kozlov. And Dr. Kozlov is a Ph.D. in economics, content editor and lecturer based in Russia and Israel. With expertise in economic analysis, policy, and education, he brings valuable insights from both academia and practice. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Aleksander Kozlov, and the presentation of his is titled The Limits of Progress: Challenges, Contradictions, and Crises in Search of a New Scientific Paradigm. So please, and this will again be in Russian, just to remind you, please select your translation channel directly on Zoom in your language. And now please go ahead, Dr. Kozlov.
Да, благодарю, Йохим, за такое представление прекрасное.
Thank you, Joachim, for the wonderful introduction. Thank you very much. Hello, dear colleagues. It's very pleasant to hear these reports, and I'm overjoyed that I was able to listen to almost all of the reports, and now I feel like maybe even respond a little bit to some, there is a cross-reference to some of the information that I wanted to present as well with these wonderful presentations that we already heard. As a small, short introduction, my report relates to development progress. It is a global topic, a universal topic. It is a group that started small but began to grow, and it started just with very short pieces like of short papers, and then as we started to grow and reach out to higher ups, more accomplished individuals, successful in their fields, those who would help us to convey our message, those who were already beginning to feel the powerful crisis that's setting in and the necessity for a new paradigm that's knocking on the door of humanity. But then our knowledge, our understanding of this problem, we can only present it in a limited fashion. I literally remember having just one piece of paper that which I would take into various meetings, and it felt to us that, oh, this is enough, sufficient. You know, we could explain everything with this one piece of paper, and then we can move to the new paradigm. But now, as it turns out, that that's not the case. In order to reach a great many people, we need a very serious amount of research, very deep, profound communication of the material. We have published lots of different reports, participated in many conferences, including international ones, on all the continents of the world, and we were always polishing our information. And it turns out that our information, it's not quite as compact. It requires more and more additional angles and explanations. So that's what I'm going to try to share with you. And this conference in itself allows us to feel more and more arguments, more and more examples and approaches and views, and we complement each other. And as a result, we polish our message, which becomes more and more integral and more effective for the world to respond to. So let's begin. Parallel to this, I need to show my presentation. Here, I have it on my end as well. Slideshow. I hope that everything is clear and visible. So I wanted to touch upon a few different aspects and perhaps maybe respond to them as well together. So, what do we understand as progress? The world talks about it a lot. There are lots of problems that come up as a result. And essentially, we have a certain stable understanding in the world of progress as something linear. But let's review some of these characteristics together. Is progress as the step-by-step development forward? Is it an increase in certain parameters, maybe consumer consumption or services or knowledge maybe certain conveniences as we understand it in terms of transportation or communication or connection between people. These are all correct, all these things, but it does not provide us with a comprehensive view as to why progress is reached a dead end and why we find ourselves in this systemic crisis that humanity is trying to find, or at least pretending like it's trying to find a way out. But we understand that these solutions are not comprehensive and they're not effective in allowing us to bring humanity out of this crisis. So we can already begin to reflect some of these things as how does humanity see progress? First of all, access of time, that each new period of time is better than the one that came before it. That's a common understanding of progress, but now we can understand that if we look at history, that from the time of starting with perhaps the scientific revolution, or even before, when we're talking about the Renaissance of humanity, ever since then, philosophy and sciences, they've been talking about linear progress, a continual improvement and upgrade of humanity. But here now, for the first time, our generation is facing the possibility that our children are going to have a worse life than us, and slowly but surely, more and more people are coming to terms with this, and we're seeing now that we're looking at a collapse, a breakdown, and so forth. Now, of course, on the one hand, we have all sorts of parameters that are growing, but in terms of happiness, in terms of the human life becoming more satisfying, more fulfilling to a person's inner development. Of course, we're not seeing this at all. At the same time, we're also seeing that we understand that progress is inevitable, right? We are always adding more knowledge, and each new period comes with more knowledge, greater development. On the one hand, we see. On the other hand, we see a degradation in education, in reading. Far fewer people are reading. Education scores are coming down. It doesn't help us that we have all these tools, calculators. People just don't have basic skills to do even, just to remember basic things. Forget about, let alone any understanding like of comprehensive history or anything like that. We're already seeing that all these quantitative measurements, they are insufficient. We're seeing that we have arrived at a systems crisis. We're in a crisis where we now need to look at and find new motivations, new stimuli to develop humanity, new models. We can even say that whereas before, previously, when we looked at progress as a picture that we would aspire to from those utopians, those following maybe Marxism or like various other socialistic ideas, right? There was always a picture, a specific picture that everyone aspired to, right? That this is the standard, and you're going to be happy if you have, two telephones, a car, a house, and maybe some other means of transportation. But today we see that practically, in order to come to understand progress and development, we need to overcome, and in order to overcome the Congress where humanity finds itself, we need completely different criteria. And we see that progress is no longer a straight line. It is a sum of vectors, perhaps maybe seemingly disconnected, where we need to bring into harmony lots of different contradictory processes. And for this, we need to understand the laws of development, understand the purpose of development, and then we would begin to understand where we are going and how we can begin solving our problems. Now, how can we now we can understand certain moments, like certain things, right? Technology and economics, they do not solve our core problems. They just do not. There are lots of challenges and changes that are currently underway, and these new challenges, they are compelling us to think of the core issues, core reasons, right? Recently, we went through the coronavirus, the first like truly global crisis that affected everyone, all of us. Or say, entire environmental challenges, or the threat of nuclear war, right? The threats, the problems are now global. And what do we want to say about this? That on the one hand, we see that if we do not solve these problems, then the crisis is becoming sharper, more threatening. But most importantly, it's not only that we're solving the crisis and then we come back to a stable, fulfilling life. No, but each new challenge, we're learning to accept it, to see it as an invitation for humanity to continue its inner growth, not certain superficial measurements, but a person's inner development, inner growth. And this thesis, when we're talking about a new paradigm, searching for a new paradigm, then we need to uh, highlight this important aspect that it's not just that we're looking to deal with crisis, with challenges, but we want to come to a new level, a new degree of development. Each new crisis is inviting us to come to this higher degree. And then we can look at these crises not as tragedies, not as, difficult periods in humanity, in history, but as an important instrument towards our development. And then we shift the center, the burden from solving certain superficial factors to solving the internal growth of humanity. I think this is the turning point, essentially, where we begin to realize that we need to change mankind, not the world around us. We need to develop internally with ourselves and be ready to new challenges, because the process of development does not stop, it has to continue. And consequently, we're going to be ready not just to solve them and continue leading good lives, but to understand that there will be new challenges ahead, and accordingly, we will be ready to meet them by rising to that higher level and continuing to bring our development to a higher level of development. We can, in my report, I have a conclusion that the postmodern period, and it's not just us saying it, but the world is pretty much accepted that this is the end of all development. We have already books and reports from various researchers that talk about this. And from here, we see that the process that underscores that concludes here at the end of postmodern period, it's where humanity has taken the maximum efforts. Some are still trying, but it's basically just fading away, right? When individualism, the rights of the individual over the rights of society, where individual can have, the maximum degree of freedom, we see that it's taking the most perverse forms, where we have all sorts of problems that are happening as a result. So it brings us to this dead end, not in the sense that humanity is finished developing, but it's the old paradigm that has run dry, that no longer sustains itself. And how can we characterize this period now, this crisis that is ongoing? It's not just the loss of our bearing, essentially. We see now that our previous bearings no longer work. But moreover, people just stop understanding each other. Where the world is just breaking down into various pieces. There's a schism. I don't think we've ever experienced the type of schisms we're experiencing currently. We don't have a common view of the future. We don't have a common model, a common set of ideas for development, common goals, right? And if we are answering this question, then certainly by this we are showing the way out of this crisis. So it's not just the picture of this utopian model that we need to give. When we work on our integral model of the world, we can, from the one hand, we can write out certain sets of ideas and thoughts, and even allude to certain sources, but we understand that any picture is erroneous by default. We need to make people understand that the main goal is to develop together to internally. We're going to talk in the future. We don't have to go into specifics because we can't even really imagine specifically what challenges we're going to meet, what models we will develop. The most importantly, it's the goal, the internal goal, that is to develop mankind internally, to make that is the main principle of our growth, the main of progress. It doesn't mean that the world around us is going to be safe, secure, necessarily, but we can describe certain characteristics of overcoming the crisis with certain level of confidence. And today I bring them to you. When we speak of the new paradigm, we want to begin right away that we want to show that there is a certain picture of the future. I've seen these pictures before, especially I remember one particular meeting where I was invited to this center in India, and they showed me like a paradise. Literally, they showed me like a person that's born, and they showed me specifically like what nature would be like, what society would be like, life, how what stars will shine, how people will feel, even this model of heaven on earth, paradise on earth. And the way it was presented, you can imagine I was looking at it with a smile on my face. But none of us, I'm sure, wouldn't presume to give a model of a specific picture of how it would manifest itself externally. But internally, yes, we can. We can. The laws of a personal internal development and society's development, we understand that this progress it has a goal. It's purposeful. It's designed to develop mankind, and each new challenge that comes to us from externally, we look at the pandemic or threat of war or any manipulation of human DNA, that they can turn us into robots and make us do whatever they want. Any threats, all these challenges. This is all meant to bring us to a new level internally within individual and as society. So these challenges are going to increase and get exacerbated, and development is going to get faster and faster. Of course, we can also say with certainty that there's no rest for the wicked, so to speak. We don't need to promise anyone any fantasies, any sweet pictures, but we need to explain to them the purpose of development. And as we move forward, we need to grow deeper in our explanations and explain that not only that why we need to do it, but the question now becomes, do we have enough time? Because this development is always happening along the razor's edge. The process is always very difficult, and consequently, time is constantly pushing us forward. We're always feeling that if we don't deal with these things in time, then truly we may see some tragic results. And we, of course, need to relate to this with the full level degree of responsibility. Now, what is our integral approach? First of all, it is aimed at the person's internal development, internal transformation. So the question becomes not, the main question is not what we will get from progress, what benefits, what bonuses, but who will we become and how will we be? That will be the main question for us. Further, all the levels that are currently happening in the world, we can also break down into four levels: inanimate, vegetative, animate, and human, and then we can look for solutions on those levels as well, and even higher than that. We cannot look for a level of a solution for nuclear war on the level of inanimate, right? In order to solve that challenge, we need to rise above nuclear physics, whatever it can give us and describe for us, all sorts of security protocols against nuclear arms. No, we need to understand human interaction, human development, how to solve problems on a human level, because on the technical level, we cannot find that solution. The same thing with the coronavirus. It brings us now from a biological level to a completely different level. And again, we need to rise above and so forth. Each challenge forces us, compels us to rise higher in terms of our internal growth. We cannot solve it with medicine, with weapons, with information. We will need to learn to live, really, to understand one another. This is what we're trying to achieve in our integral approach. Now, what else can I add? Now we're approaching the solution. Yesterday, I heard in a report, I heard a solution that the most important thing that will help us is a love of others in our spiritual development. Yes, that's correct. But when we say this to others, to people, they're not always ready to accept it, and we're not always able to explain what we mean by those terms. So we're looking for other, more accessible approaches in our explanations of these problems. And I've highlighted here the ability to feel one another is the foundation for a stable world. To speaking plainly, love will save the world, you can say. Love of others is the key to all problems. But to understand what love of others means and how to actualize it in practice when people are at each other's throats with an iron grip that you can't even pull them apart, then at the very least we need to understand what we mean when we say it, that we need to feel another as like myself, to accept his existence, to feel his desires, to understand that we're all different and we will always be different. We're never going to be able to come to consensus, but we can only accept that we are as we are, and we're going to become even more spiky, thorny, and different, and to understand, to learn to feel one another, not only to accept it, that there are others and that we're different, but also to really feel each other. And upon this, to learn to look for models of coexisting, of survival. We need to speak with real terminology such as this, not in our idealistic terminology. So we need to use these to, as we approach the world, the unity of many and different ones. How do we, being as different as we are, as contradictory and capricious, we all know each other. We all know ourselves and how people are, and everyone understands it. We cannot try to smooth over these aspects, these characteristics. On the one hand, moreover, we need to underscore that we're going to become even more different, even more multifaceted, and each one will manifest his own individuality, each person, each individual, and each nation. And at the same time, we need to learn to coexist. This is the main law of unification, the unity of many and different people, individual, unique people. It's we can't. It seems impossible to unite all these things, but we have no choice. We don't only need to accept it, but in this paradigm, this is where we need to look for a solution. That's the most important thing. And understanding that this diversity and differences, it's not a deficiency or flaw, that we're never going to be the same. On the contrary, this is a benefit. This is a treasure that we are able to complement each other fully up to a perfect state if we learn to take all of these individual unique qualities and start using them with while considering all each other and our entire society, our soul, or whatever term you want to use. This seemingly simple thesis, it seems simple, but we need to learn to explain it, to demonstrate it, and to propagate it, and to check it on many different levels. By the way, for over 20 years now, we've been doing circles and workshops and lectures and all sorts of exhibitions and events, presentations, anything you can think of. And when we learn with, I work with a lot of teachers and instructors in kindergartens. You feel that how this approach is being absorbed in on any level, on the level of kindergarten, on the level of elementary, high school, even university level, and so forth. We can bring it and communicate it on all levels. And so this unity of many, we need to describe it and explain it and try to show that this works in practice. And for this, the practical tools that we have, they're very persuasive. So, and here we come to a very careful proposition. How can we imagine the model of the future? Of course, we don't have any specific images or pictures, but the fact that the world cannot become like a singular. No, it needs to become multipolar, multifaceted, where you have lots of different centers of consciousness that are forming a new global system of ethics. We all grew up primarily in the Western paradigm and Western views of the world, but there are just as rich and vibrant models in China, in the Middle East, in Latin America, in Africa, everywhere. And we need to accept the right of every single one to complement the world with himself. We cannot disdain, we cannot educate someone else on human rights or institute or impose like Western values onto other people. But precisely by being very careful, approach and relate very carefully to all the different nations and think of how we can complement each other, how we can make this picture very multifaceted and diverse. Under no circumstances do we want to, can we afford to lose all of these different elements. Only together we can reach a common solution. These are the things, the elements that we need to consider. We need to understand that they stem out of spiritual laws. It's not that something that just it's not some hypotheses that some fantasies that we concocted. This is our tool of investigation, how we take spiritual laws and start implementing them painstakingly, carefully, start educating, communicating, and ourselves growing and educating ourselves. So I think that this is a very practical challenge and mission for all of us, and this is what we're doing. We spend this is where we're exerting all of our time and efforts and talents. This is the practical work, and of course, we receive great satisfaction from it. On this, I'm going to conclude. Of course, if I'm not stopped, I can continue for much more time than I have been allotted. I'm going to try to not do that. If there are questions, then please go ahead and ask them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kozlov. We would love to hear more, but actually this is true. We have running out of time, so thank you first of all for this strong and beautiful presentation here. And we have lots of questions, but I think we can only take one now. And we have a question here from our participant. And please, Gregory Notkin, would you like to raise your question?
Спасибо. Во-первых, спасибо за доклад. Это самое важное, пожалуй, что было сказано.
First of all, thank you very much. I think this is the most important thing that we've heard so far, that there cannot be unification without taking into consideration the differences, diversity of people among all people and nations, their religions, and so forth. But the question remains, how can we be one politically, especially when there are countries with totalitarian, authoritarian regimes where human rights are being trampled and crushed. And typically it's these countries that start wars. As the more these leaders remain in power, we know this from history, from experience. This aspect of political tyranny, how can it be resolved when we're dealing with such regimes? Is there a solution for it when we're dealing with something like this? Friends, maybe I didn't succeed in explaining this, but our research brings us to a point that our life is not going to get better in this world. It's not that we're looking to, how to correct this thing or that thing, how to impose our views on someone else, or maybe it's impossible. We simply need to understand that all challenges, including those that you referenced, they are given to us purposefully in order to make us grow and develop, and they are necessary. Otherwise, humanity is not going to develop. If the humanity is not going to be pushed and prodded to search for solutions. Now, you're living with this question, right? And you are forced to look for an answer, even though it may seem to me, oh, it would have been nice to solve this problem this way. No, but it won't be solved. There will be even more problems as a result. What we're saying is that we don't stop progress here. Progress doesn't end here. It means that any problem is forcing us to continue developing and look for solutions. If there was no problem, then we wouldn't be looking for solutions. We'd be living somewhere on a desert island, eating coconuts and fighting each other over coconuts. And our problems would be that one of us, took the biggest, most colorful feather, and that's what created the conflict. And now we're going to go to war over it. The problems are the same, and they're going to continue. That's why the most important thing to understand is that everything is purposeful, including the behavior of elites and leaders, the conflicts between different people and countries. This is a necessary and essential process. And thank God it is forcing us to develop, at least us, right? And all of the world as well. That's why I have no problems with anyone. Everything is going just as it should be, and I think that we need to justify the laws of development that the world is developing by, and simply to understand the purpose that they serve, and to look for solutions internally and not externally. That's it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kozlov. Thank you so much for your presentation and for your answer here. It was very insightful and meaningful to us. And if there are more questions, please send them to our common email address, conference.ayut@gmail.com, and the presenters will be happy to answer them. So before we transition to the next presenter. Please, let's implement what we heard. Maybe we hear many contradicting aspects. Maybe some things don't really sit well or we don't understand. And let's include this. Let's take an integral perspective on this to allow these different aspects that we are hearing just to be here. They don't need to be one. They can be diverse, as we just heard right now. To allow diversity as a foundation that we go into a higher level, as we heard now, of unity. So let's implement this as we transition into the next presentation. I'm very